This framework has saved 4, 5, and 6-figure deals for myself, even when I haven't necessarily done the rest of the call perfectly. If you follow these 3 steps that I'm going to walk you through in this video, you will be able to close more deals, you'll be able to help more people, and ultimately, you'll be able to make some more money in the process. So let's get into it. So we're talking about the part of the call that is after all of the positive emotional highs, when you've gone through, what would that do for you personally, your future, how would that do for your family, how would that feel, what version of you does that create, blah, 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 like all the stuff that you go through to get somebody into an emotionally high state. This is the part of the call immediately after where you kind of take it away, and some people refer to it as cost of an action, some people refer to it as consequence, some people refer to it as the commitment stage, all those sorts of questions, right? However, there is a very good order to these questions that I've personally found in order to really come up with one of the most powerful versions of this part of the call that I've ever really seen. Now, this works well for biz ops. This works well for businesses who are looking to get some help, who are like smaller businesses, anywhere from, 10 million or less, I'd say, in revenue a year. And like, you don't usually have to do it as much with businesses over 10 million a year, but sometimes you do. Like, it just kind of depends. So this really works well if you're in fitness, or again, like BizOp, if you are giving people marketing help, helping them learn a new skill, whatever it might be. So here is the basic order. All right, number 1 is taking a look at what happens if the same amount of time that has already passed, that they've had this idea, they've been looking at this, they've been really considering making this change up until now. What happens if that period of time happens again and they haven't actually made any sort of changes, and they keep experiencing X, Y, and Z that's causing them to miss out on A and B and C, and they're never actually able to, over the next 4 years, achieve, D, E, F. That's question 1. What happens if this timeline that has already happened repeats? Now, what this does, it's very good because it's hard to get out of. I'm sure if you have been closing for any period of time, you will have heard responses to your first consequence question like, well, I'm not going to let that happen. Or I'm going to do whatever it takes in order to blah, 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 blah. And like, that's great. But the reality is they've allowed that to happen already, or else they wouldn't be here on this call in some semblance of the word. So like, if you've been looking at getting into e-commerce for the past 4 years, what happens if another 4 years goes by and you haven't actually learned the skills to be able to leave your job, and you're still working for the dead end boss? Like, you're still not able to spend the time with your kids. You're still not able to X and Y and Z. That's what this whole first question is about. And it will help avoid the clapbacks that a prospect might give you of like, I'm not going to let that happen or anything like that, because you are relating it to the fact that this has already happened for the past 4 years. What happens if that happens again? Right? What if that keeps happening for another 4 years? All right. So that's question number 1. From there, there's a couple of deeper layers that you can get into about, how would that make you feel? Are you willing to settle for that? Like, all those sorts of things. But I'm going to stay high level in this video. If you want to go in deeper, I run a sales training community called the Sales Dojo. The link is going to be down in the description. If you'd like to join, I am happy to give you 7 days of free access to that. See how you like it. If you think it's helpful, stay in. If you don't, you can bounce. But anyway, back to the video. Once you have actually covered, you've been doing this for XYZ amount of timeline, what happens if that continues and you actually keep experiencing pains, haven't achieved goals, etc., etc. The next level of this, all right, the next real step of a really good consequence is deserve, all right? Do you feel that your wife deserves to go and actually take the vacations and to make the memories with her life that she wants? Do you feel that she deserves the version of you who's able to provide that to her? Do you feel that your kids deserve to have a dad who's there for them, who can spend the time with them, who can take them to Disney World? Do you feel that your mom deserves a version of you who's able to actually help her in her retirement, just like she helped you when you were a kid? Deserve is about going to the external person that this prospect cares about the most, talking about whether they deserve the goal outcome that the prospect has previously talked about in the sales call. So this gets in a little bit deeper than I'd like to go on this video, but the basic gist is what I teach people: in order to know how deep to go in discovery, in order to know how deep to take the emotional high, if you will, in order to know like you've done enough, you have to get to family. You have to get to the other people that this person cares about the most. And I've seen this time and time again in my own sales calls, in the thousands of sales calls that I've seen from other sales reps. Ultimately, once you get to the level where you're talking about family, whether it be for a negative or for a positive, that's how you know that you've gone deep enough. So a negative family might be, I want to be able to do all of these things because I never had that as a kid. And my mom died early on and my dad was just a total piece of shit. And I don't want my family to go through that. That's the family level. But like the layer of the onion outside of that, you have to peel off in order to get there, might be something like, I just really want to make sure that I'm able to take time off of work and go on these vacations. And the layer outside of that might be, I need to find a way to make money outside of my work because I can't take time off. The layer outside of that might be, I really want to make like 5-6K a month with e-commerce, right? So there's layers to go through, and once you get to the innermost layer of the family, that's usually how you know that you've gone far enough. Now there are a couple of layers below that, but I won't get into that now. That's how you know you've gone far enough. You can take it further. Sometimes you need to, sometimes you don't. But once you get to the family, now in the cost of inaction, consequence, commitment stage, you get to this deserve part, the second part of this cost of inaction stage. And ultimately, it's, do you feel that this other person that you care about deserves what it is that they want in their life? All right. So again, it might be the wife being able to not work at the job as a teacher that she hates. The deserve might be your kids being able to go to Disney World because they see all their friends going. The deserve might be, your mom not having to work into retirement, but that she can finally retire and know that she's taken care of. Pretty much every time, the prospect is going to say, yes, I feel that that person deserves that thing. And the goal of the question is to get them to realize that the other person does deserve that thing and that they have the ability to help that person achieve that for their life. Now, once that other person deserves that thing, now you can wrap it back to another deserve question. Do you think that person that you care so much about, that deserves that outcome, do you think that person deserves the version of you who's able to provide that for them? Now, this works really well with the male audience. Husbands, fathers, right? Boyfriends even, right? Males, this works really, really well for. Do you feel, your mom deserves a version of you who's actually able to provide that for her to where she can retire? She doesn't have to keep breaking her back at the grocery store like she has for the past 50 years since before she even had you, right? Do you feel that she deserves to be provided for in that way? Pretty much every guy is going to be like, hell yes, like she does. Now, if you have a female on the call, it will still work. It just usually isn't as powerful, all right? Because there's just a little bit less of the provider drive in females unless they're the only one providing. Do you think that person deserves the version of you who is able to give that to them? Now, slight difference, but it does make a world of difference. Provide versus give, all right? Naturally, don't come at me for this. I'm just going to say it. Naturally, the female energy is a little bit more giving, and naturally, the male energy is a little bit more providing, all right? So just make that small adjustment in your languaging, and I bet you'll find that it lands better for each of those respective audiences. And then, now that we've got this deserve, again, you can ask a couple of follow-up questions to really make it hit home. But then now the third and final step, realistically, the third and final really big step for a good cost of inaction that I haven't seen anywhere else. And I'll wrap all this into like what I have seen from everywhere else next. But the third and biggest step is then, say that you get to the end of your life and, you're old, you got the gray hairs, and you look back on your life and you realize that you didn't actually do what you needed to do in order to provide or give back to this person that you care about in the way that you wanted to. So an example of this may be a dad looking back with his kids not being able to make memories. What happens, or what would it feel like if you got to 90-year-old version of you, of Joe, and you look back on your life and you realize that you weren't there for your kids. You realize that you didn't actually make the decisions to put yourself and them in a position where you can go and make the memories together. You weren't able to go to Disney World like you wanted to. And you realize your kids grew up only ever knowing that dad can't do stuff because he's got to go work. And they grow up and they know that they've missed out. How would that make you feel as their dad? How would that make you feel as a husband to your wife's children? Or husband to your wife and her children. That'd be a little weird. But anyway, that's the third step. So now just to contextualize this a little bit, there are like a couple of things that you have to do after that that I have learned from a few other people. Again, it's just kind of like regurgitated at this point, like all the coaches say all the different things, but these are pretty common things that I found to work really well. Responsibility, settle, and time to make a change. So responsibility is like, whose responsibility is it to actually make the decisions in your life to where you can achieve A and B and C, to where, you can make the memories with your kids. You can take them to Disney World. You don't have to worry about the job, blah, 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 blah. Whose responsibility is it to actually make the decisions that lead to that outcome that you want? Number 2, settle. Are you willing to settle for that version of you who's not able to do those things? And then last but not least is, are you ready to make this change in your life and, really draw that line to where you're able to do all these things, make the changes, and ultimately become this new version of you for you and your family and your future, so that you can achieve all the things that you mentioned, blah, 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 blah. So that's like the final post third step things that you need to go through. But generally, that's about it. That's the consequence. That's the cost of inaction. That's the process. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Very, very simple. Go back through, study it. And as you implement this, if you have any questions, if there's any responses that you feel like prospects are giving you that you don't really know how to handle, put them down in the comments, and I will go through and I'll respond to each and every one of those with a basic word track on how to actually overcome that, what you might have missed, and ultimately what you can do to help more people and make more money in the process. Oh yeah, and again, if you'd like to learn more about any of this, I teach all of this and so much more inside of my sales training community. The link is down inside the description of this video, as well as in my link in the bio. It is called the Sales Dojo, and we meet multiple times a week. There's courses, there's digital assets, there's scripts, there's frameworks, there's Miro boards, there's everything that you need in order to level up as a salesperson is all in there for you. So go check it out. There's a 7-day free trial. If you don't like it, you can just cancel the subscription. And if you like it, who knows? You might actually make some extra money.